Welcome to the Forgotten Narrator. It began as a flicker on the edge of perception, a shadow that bled across the stars. One moment, the galaxy was wounded. The next, it was torn in half. The Great Rift, the Cicatrix Maledictum, did not erupt with a grand fanfare or a singular, godlike strike. It blossomed across the void like a malignant flower, swallowing empires, drowning light, and severing the Imperium of man in two. And yet, in all the screaming madness that followed, in all the shattered chronicles, broken worlds, and endless war, a question remains, whispered by terrified scribes and dismissed by inquisitors alike. Why do we not know where it began? There is no recorded origin point, no precise location that historians or seers or cartographers can agree upon. The rift did not behave like any other galactic event. Its birth was not captured in data logs or psychic echoes. No warning, no coordinates, no aftermath to trace. It is as if it erupted simultaneously everywhere and nowhere, a paradox in space and time. And so we ask, not as idle curiosity, but as a desperate act of understanding. Why are there no records of the Great Rift's epicenter? What force, what will, ensured its origin would be cloaked in shadows deeper than the warp itself? The warp has always defied comprehension. To call it an ocean of madness is to lend it too much structure. It is not merely a realm of dreams or demonic kingdoms. It is thought given substance, emotion made flesh, a non-space where the laws of physics become playthings of capricious gods. For millennia, the Imperium of man has relied on it, sailed its currents, and feared its tempests. But nothing, not even the tumult of the Horus Heresy or the eruption of the Eye of Terror, compared to the howling apocalypse that split the galaxy during the birth of the Great Rift. The warp did not just break into real space, it devoured it. What emerged in the time leading to the Cicatrix Maledictum was not a breach, it was a detonation. A trillion psychic screams, accumulated sins, forgotten sorceries, and divine fury coalesced into a rupture so vast it defied understanding. The rift's appearance was less like a wound and more like a metaphysical convulsion, a seizure of reality itself. This was not the work of a single sorcerer or a ritual gone wrong. This was centuries of corruption, pain, and psychic trauma erupting all at once, as if the warp had grown sick of containment and chose that moment to exhale. The fundamental truth is this: the warp is not bound by linear causality. Time flows erratically within it. Events can echo backward, loop infinitely, or never occur at all. It is a domain where consequences precede causes, and intentions are as malleable as dreams. When such a realm interfaces violently with the materium, the result is not a clean point of impact. The rupture may have occurred in 1,000 places simultaneously, or it may have begun in a moment that has not yet happened. This is why to search for the epicenter of the Great Rift may be a category error, like asking for the center of a nightmare. And still, despite this philosophical quagmire, the warp's nature only explains part of the enigma. After all, even the Eye of Terror, vast and ancient, has boundaries. Its formation, however mythologized, can be traced to the fall of the Eldar. Yet the rift seems to mock that precedent. It is not a static anomaly. It shifts, grows, and recoils like a living thing. Entire star systems once thought safe have vanished beneath its shadow without warning. Maps are obsolete the moment they are made. Psychic beacons flicker and die without cause. No chart or sensorium can fix its edges. The warp has not merely torn the galaxy, it has begun to overwrite it. The rift pulses with the strength of belief. On some worlds, it seethes with blood and brass, echoing the rage of Khorne. Elsewhere, it is a swirling maze of lies and beauty, clearly Tzeentchian. There are planets where the rift pours forth plagues and rot in Nurgle's name, and others where the sensual insanity of Slaanesh reigns. The warp's chaos reflects the minds of mortals, which means the rift's geography is subjective. Its origin might differ depending on who seeks it. A word-bearer may swear it began at Calth. A Black Templar might name Cadia. An Eldar Farseer may speak of a place lost before humanity even existed. Some psychers who survived the rift's emergence describe it not as an external phenomenon, but as an internal revelation, a great scream that came from within their own souls. They did not perceive it as a tear across the stars, but as the shattering of a psychic dam inside themselves. Such accounts have led radical scholars to speculate that the Great Rift did not appear at all, but that it was always there. a latent cancer in the fabric of the galaxy, hidden by the Emperor's light, only now bursting forth because the veil of his power has thinned. Ultimately, to seek the origin of the rift within the warp is like chasing shadows in a void where light itself is a lie. The warp does not offer answers. It offers distortions, reflections, mockeries. And in the case of the Great Rift, it offers only silence, or too many answers, each as plausible as the last. What we face is not merely a physical cataclysm but a metaphysical riddle. One that has no beginning, only consequences. It is easy to assume that the Imperium's countless administratum scribes, inquisitorial dataseers, and mechanicus cogitators would possess some record, some inkling, of where the Great Rift began. But in the age of Imperium, information is a dying ember. It flickers briefly in the hands of those who record it, then is swallowed by bureaucracy, zealotry, or the indifference of time. The Imperium is not a realm of clarity or preservation. It is a civilization built atop forgotten ruins, its archives collapsing under the weight of contradictory truths. And when the Cicatrix Maledictum erupted, it wasn't just reality that split, it was history itself. The moment the rift formed, the Imperium's information infrastructure was annihilated. Astropathic choirs screamed into silence. Data streams ceased. Star charts, navigational rights, and centuries of celestial records were rendered obsolete. Across the Imperium Nihilus, vox traffic died like a severed artery, and even in Imperium Sanctus, comprehension was crippled. Entire forge worlds went dark. Millions of libraria and data vaults were incinerated by the sudden surge of warp corruption. No central record remained, no synchronized timeline. The Imperium could not record the rift's birth. It was blind when the wound was made. But even before that cataclysm, the Imperium's relationship with truth was tenuous. Histories are not kept for accuracy, they are kept for dogma. Information is power, and power is feared. Inquisitors purge knowledge as often as they preserve it. The Adeptus Mechanicus hoards data like dragons with treasure, doling it out in encoded fragments to those deemed worthy. Many truths that may have shed light on the rift's origins likely died not in the explosion of its coming, but in the flames of holy censorship long before. And worse still, when contradiction arises, the Imperium does not investigate. It declares the contradiction heresy and removes the speaker. Among the fragmented records that do survive, there is no agreement. Some chronicles blame Cadia, others mention warp storms near Ultramar, Fenris, or even lost Caliban. In some sectors, cults have formed around the belief that their own worlds were the true origin, chosen for punishment or glory. The multiplicity of such claims reflects not merely confusion, but a deep corruption of historiography itself. Many of these accounts were written after the rift appeared. Based on dreams, visions, or flawed memory. They are as likely to reflect personal guilt or prophecy as fact. There are also signs of deliberate tampering. Certain inquisitorial datasets reference specific star systems showing precursory warp turbulence, and then abruptly redact them. Some Mechanicus archives simply end mid-cycle, as if someone had purged them in haste. Aboard derelict ships adrift near the rift, data recorders contain partial logs corrupted by unknown code or recursive paradoxes, as though the very act of documenting the rift introduced a kind of narrative infection. This has given rise to the chilling theory of mimetic corruption, that to know the epicenter is to become part of its madness. One theory posits that the rift's formation rewrote reality itself, not just the present, but the past. That at the moment it bloomed, a retroactive wave of warp energy coursed backward through time, shattering causal chains and rewriting the very foundations of memory and chronicle. This would explain why there are no clear before and after comparisons, why even the most precise cogitator systems seem to lack consensus, why there is no consistent record of the last seconds before darkness fell. In this view, the Great Rift is not a linear event, it is a narrative rupture, a metaphysical infection that erases its own trail. What remains is hearsay and fear. Astartes captains who swear they saw a second sun ignite and vanish. Rogue traders who charted systems that no longer exist. Priests who preach that the rift is not a place but a judgment, and therefore beyond mortal mapping. Some say the records were destroyed by chaos. Others whisper that they were hidden by the Imperium itself, because the truth is more terrifying than ignorance. That to know the epicenter would be to know who allowed it to happen, or worse, who called it into being. There was a moment, brief, terrifying, and eternal, when the light of the Astronomicon failed. Across half the galaxy, the Emperor's beacon, that golden fire that had guided mankind for 10,000 years, sputtered and died. It was not a mere dimming, it was an extinction. Starships vanished, warp travel ceased, planets fell into silence. The Noctis Eterna, the night eternal, had begun, and in that darkness, the Imperium ceased to see itself. The galaxy was blind, and without vision, no one could watch the rift being born. The Astronomicon is more than a lighthouse. It is a psychic constant, a point of orientation that allows the Imperium to define location, direction, and even time itself within the warp's roiling madness. When it failed, so too did all spatial certainty. No astropath could reach beyond their own system. No navigator could pierce the veil. Every ship that dared to enter the Immaterium became a candle cast into a hurricane. In that blindfolded moment, countless worlds cried out, unheard and unheeded. It was the perfect cover, or the perfect inevitability. The rift did not hide from the Imperium. The Imperium was too blind to see it arrive. There are stories from that dark time, scattered like shards of broken glass. Ships drifting through silence, captains clutching relics and praying for light, astropaths who clawed out their own eyes as the shadows whispered secrets only they could hear. Planets that believed they had been abandoned, not knowing that the rest of the galaxy was equally adrift. And in that swirling terror, there was no coordinated response, no unified awareness. There could be no witnesses. Even the most advanced sensoriums of Mars and Terra were useless in the psychic eclipse. Some survivors of the Noctis Eterna speak of a sensation deeper than blindness, a severance, as if they had been cut from the soul of the galaxy itself. The warp, for all its horror, had always felt connected, like a vast, mad consciousness. But during the rift's emergence, even that connection broke. There was nothing, no echoes, no dreams, only void. Such accounts lend weight to the theory that the rift was not simply a tear, but a nullification. A moment when the psychic essence of the galaxy was hollowed out and replaced. When the Astronomicon finally blazed back to life, roaring brighter than ever with the resurrection of Robot Guilliman and the arrival of Call's dark technologies, it did not do so cleanly. The Imperium's awareness returned in fragments. Systems were discovered to be lost. Others had changed inexplicably. Warp tides had shifted entire sectors. Even the stars were not where they had been. What appeared to be the re-illumination of the galaxy revealed a broken mirror. No longer could anyone say for certain what had happened, or when. The rift was simply there, spanning the stars, and no one could agree on how it came to be. Guilliman himself reportedly demanded answers. But even the master of mankind's favored son was denied clarity. The High Lords offered conflicting timelines. The Adeptus Mechanicus offered only corrupted data. The Inquisition offered silence, or obfuscation. What the reborn Primarch saw was not a galaxy in mourning, but a galaxy in denial. Every corner of the Imperium offered different stories, different theories, all cloaked in the self-preserving language of political survival. And still, the heart of the mystery remained. The rift had formed during a time when no one could observe it, when even the Emperor's light had failed. Some radical Imperial scholars argue this was no coincidence, that the Noctis Eterna was a necessary condition for the rift's formation, that the Astronomicon, powered by the Emperor's own soul, had kept the rift at bay for 10 millennia, and that in the moment of its faltering, the warp surged forward, seizing the opportunity to pour into real space. Others take it further, suggesting the Astronomicon itself was corrupted, that something reached back through its psychic fire to strike from within. That the beacon did not fail, it was inverted. There are darker theories still. That the Noctis Eterna was engineered, that someone or something caused the Astronomicon to falter, precisely to create the perfect environment for the rift's eruption. If true, then the epicenter is not just a mystery of geography, but of treachery. And the silence that followed? Not ignorance, but design. What makes the mystery even more maddening is the geographical paradox at the heart of the rift's formation. The Cicatrix Maledictum cleaved the galaxy nearly in two, stretching across tens of thousands of light-years in a jagged scar of warp corruption. And yet, for all its apocalyptic breadth, one region remained conspicuously untouched: the segmentum solar. Terra, Mars, and the sacred heart of the Imperium stood firm in the light. The Emperor's domain, ancient and sanctified, escaped the rift's grasp, while the rest of the galaxy burned. This immunity, if it can be called that, raises unsettling implications. Was the segmentum solar spared by divine will or deliberate exclusion? If the rift had a true epicenter, logic might suggest it should lie near the deepest point of its spread, or at least at a convergence of maximum disruption. And yet, the area surrounding Terra, the most psychically active, heavily defended, and spiritually significant region in the galaxy, saw nothing of the initial tearing. The warp did not claw at the throne world skies. The rift did not emerge from mankind's cradle. Instead, it surrounded it, framing the solar segmentum like an eye around a pupil. This peculiarity has inspired radical hypotheses. One argues that the segmentum solar was not spared. It was protected. That vast arrays of ancient, possibly Xenos or Dark Age technologies lie buried beneath Terra and Mars, designed to hold back warp incursions. The Golden Throne itself may be part of this mechanism, not merely a life support system for the Emperor, but a fulcrum of anti-warp resonance. In this view, the rift's formation may have been repelled by the psychic pressure of the throne world, much as fire bends around solid stone. But such protection may not be absolute or passive. Some have dared to suggest that the Emperor himself enacted this shielding, not to save humanity, but to conceal something. That the absence of warp breach in the segmentum solar isn't an act of mercy, but a deliberate suppression of the rift's point of origin. If the epicenter lies anywhere, they argue, it may lie beneath the very place the light still shines, hidden in the blinding blaze of the Astronomicon, shrouded not by distance, but by proximity to power. There is a deep-rooted fear within certain circles of the Inquisition that the Imperium's reliance on the Astronomicon may be its greatest vulnerability. That the beacon's brightness masks something within, a psychic rot, or a conduit, or even the whisper of a god. The Great Rift may not have spared Terra. It may have passed through it first, invisible, undetectable. Or worse, it may still be there, metastasizing inside the core of the Imperium, its malignancy hidden beneath the machinery of divine order. Consider the timing. The Great Rift formed at a moment of immense psychic upheaval. Cadia had fallen, Guilliman had returned, the Eldar had birthed Iniad, the Necrons were stirring, and the Mechanicus were awakening relics best left untouched. If all this occurred within a span of a few Terran years, what other hidden act could have slipped past perception? A clandestine ritual? A sacrifice made not by a chaos cult, but by an Imperial sect, desperate to harness forbidden warp energy for the greater good. Then there's the strange behavior of the rift itself. Unlike the Eye of Terror, which radiates outward from a central location, the Great Rift does not behave like a traditional explosion or expansion. Its jagged path often avoids certain regions while doubling back on others. It pulses unevenly, like a heartbeat or a mind. This suggests a degree of intention. And if intention exists, then so too does the possibility that the rift's formation was directed. Not as a weapon, but as a shield. A smokescreen for something deeper, darker, and closer than anyone suspects. The silence of the segmentum solar may not be an accident. It may be a scream muffled by psychic suppression, a blinding light concealing a deeper darkness. In sparing the throne world, the warp may have allowed humanity to believe in safety, while anchoring its corruption in the very heart of the Imperium. When the last pylons fell and Cadia broke, the galaxy trembled. The shattered world, long held as the gatekeeper of the Eye of Terror, was obliterated beneath the weight of Abaddon's fury. To most within the Imperium, Cadia's death was the herald of the Great Rift. It is spoken of as the event that tore reality, that opened the door to the warp's flood. Entire generations have grown up believing that Cadia was the epicenter, that its fall was not just symbolic, but causal. But what if this is a misdirection? What if Cadia's destruction was not the spark, but the smokescreen? The narrative is compelling. A world that stood for 10,000 years against the tides of chaos finally breaks, and in its wake, the warp explodes into real space. It satisfies the human need for cause and effect, for punishment and consequence. But Cadia was not a generator. It was a bulwark. Its pylons, ancient Necron tech repurposed by humanity, were suppressors of warp instability, not barriers to existence itself. Their destruction released pressure, yes, but was that pressure localized, or merely a symptom of something larger already unfolding? The more cynical minds of the Ordo Xenos and Ordo Hereticus have long suspected that Abaddon's assault on Cadia was not about strategy, but spectacle. That the War Master, or the dark gods guiding him, knew that the Imperium would focus its attention there. That by striking at a symbol, they could cloak the true movements of chaos elsewhere. In this view, Cadia was a martyr, not to save the Imperium, but to distract it. A grand sleight of hand, while darker acts were committed in the blind spots of the galaxy. There are reports, heavily redacted, often dismissed as apocryphal, of warp surges occurring before Cadia's demise. Of minor rifts and demonic manifestations in far-flung systems without known relation to the Eye of Terror. Some speak of tremors in the webway, or fluctuations in the Astronomican's pulse, weeks or even months before Cadia fell. If true, this suggests that the warp was already in upheaval, and Cadia's fall was merely the crest of a wave, not its origin. Furthermore, the destruction of the pylons themselves is clouded in confusion. Accounts from surviving Cadian officers conflict. Some suggest the pylons failed due to external bombardment. Others claim a psychic overload triggered by something beneath the planet. One heretical theory posits that the pylons did not fail. They resonated, that their collapse was not an explosion, but a signal. A final scream across the stars that triggered the next stage of a far older plan. The framing of Cadia as the epicenter also serves political ends. It allows the Imperium to focus its narrative, to name a villain, Abaddon, to name a victim, Cadia, to declare vengeance and rally the faithful. In the face of galactic trauma, such clarity is valuable, but it may also be a lie. A comforting fiction that hides the complexity and the horror of the truth. Because if Cadia is not the source, then the source is still unknown, and an unknown origin implies an unknown purpose. Some among the Eldar whisper that the true wound was not in real space, but in the psychic latticework of the galaxy itself. That the fall of Cadia was the breaking of the final keystone in a psychic dam constructed not by humans or Necrons, but by the Old Ones, long before the birth of mankind. That the Great Rift had been waiting, coiled in the heart of the warp, for that final unbinding. In this theory, Abaddon was not the cause, but the pawn. The knife, not the hand that guided it. It is this possibility that terrifies the Inquisition most. That even as they interrogate the ruins of Cadia, even as they construct their histories and burn the heretical texts, the true epicenter lies elsewhere. Forgotten, hidden, or worse, protected. And by believing the lie, by focusing on the spectacular fall of a world, they may have missed the subtle death of reality itself, happening quietly in a place no one dares to look. Among the most maddening aspects of the Great Rift is its refusal to conform to a singular vision of intent. If it were the design of one chaos god, perhaps it could be traced, analyzed, feared with some precision. But the ruinous powers are not unified. They are not even allies. They are hatred incarnate, born of the darkest impulses of mortal minds, and they loathe each other with the fury of aeons. The warp is their battleground, and the rift is their banner. A banner no one truly claims. Because if the Great Rift is a message, it is written in 4 hands, none of which agree on the language. Each god imprints their will on the warp in different ways. Khorne's presence is rage incarnate, rivers of blood, endless conflict, the roar of unending war. Tzeentch weaves lies into light, turning causality into a maze of change. Nurgle corrupts the flesh of reality with decay, entropy, and stagnation masked as comfort. Slaanesh offers beauty and excess so overwhelming it burns away identity itself. These forces, contradictory and chaotic, do not build together. They cannibalize each other. If the rift were created by one, the others would surely seek to unmake it. And yet the Great Rift endures. That alone is strange. The Eye of Terror is firmly in the domain of chaos undivided, but even it shows zones of godly control. The rift, by contrast, flickers like a kaleidoscope of blasphemy. Some regions swell with Nurgle's filth, others twist with Tzeentch's illusions. There are worlds within the rift that burn with the soundless screaming of Slaanesh's choir, and battlefields where Khorne's wrath echoes forever. No unifying pattern, no central source. It is a battlefield masquerading as a wound, or perhaps a wound so deep that it reveals the battlefield beneath. If the Chaos gods did not build it together, then perhaps none of them built it at all. Perhaps it was an accidental convergence, a psychic storm born from their endless conflict, a side effect of their unbound growth. Just as a hurricane does not choose a path, the Great Rift may be a storm of malignancy, guided only by the most primal forces of hatred, fear, and desire. It was not summoned, it simply was, when the warp's collective mass of corruption grew too vast to be contained. There is also the theory of metaphysical resonance, that the rift is not a singular creation, but the overlap of countless ritual failures, psychic collapses, and demonic bleed-throughs across the galaxy. Like fractures in a sheet of ice, each alone was survivable, but together they formed a shattering. The war in the webway, the fall of craft worlds, the betrayal of the 13th Black Crusade. Each act of chaos tore at reality, and when enough threads frayed, the entire weave unraveled. No one god plotted it, but all benefited, which means none can be trusted to speak of it. Some daemons whisper of a secret fifth force, not a god but a principle. The concept of chaos undivided made flesh. A being or will not born from any one emotion but from the amalgamation of all, the ultimate expression of imbalance. This entity, if it exists, may not seek worship but entropy. It would not care for thrones or cults or symbolism. It would simply devour. The Great Rift, in this view, is its breath, a sigh of anti-being that collapses meaning. A horror beyond even the gods, because it offers no promises, no power, only erasure. This could explain the lack of clarity surrounding the rift's origin. If even the gods cannot agree, how could mortals? If the rift was not made but born, not summoned but spilled, then there is no epicenter. There is only a confluence of horrors, a culmination of every failed ritual, every dying scream, every madness unchecked. Chaos did not plan it. Chaos is it. But perhaps the most unsettling theory is this, that one god did plan it, but has concealed its hand so perfectly that even the others are fooled. Tzeentch, perhaps, whose schemes span millennia and contradict themselves for his amusement. Or Nurgle, who let the wound fester in silence until the galaxy rotted from the inside. If this is true, then the rift has a mind, a strategy, a center, and it is watching. The Eldari have always walked a narrower blade of fate than any other race. Ancient beyond reckoning, their souls attuned to the warp in ways humans can scarcely understand. They perceive the currents of reality not as linear events, but as strands of an intricate, ever-shifting web. To them, the Great Rift is not just a wound, it is a consequence foretold. And perhaps more disturbingly, it is a known quantity. Because among the Eldari, there are whispers that they knew the epicenter, that they watched it unfold in their visions and said nothing. The concept of the Rana Dandra, the final battle at the end of time, has long haunted Eldar prophecy. It is not merely an apocalypse, but a resolution of all fates. In the centuries leading to the rift's eruption, Farseers reported increasing anomalies in the skeins of fate. Threads that once branched 1,000 ways now ended abruptly. Whole possibilities collapsed into singular inevitabilities. It was as though something massive, something fate-breaking, was about to occur. Some among the Seer Councils believed it was the final stage of Slaanesh's dominion. Others believed it was a flaw in their interpretations. But the most radical voices claimed it was the birth of something worse. There is a persistent legend among the Eldari Exodites and certain craft-world circles of a psychic map. A metaphysical cartograph not of stars, but of consequences. This map, known only as the Morning Spiral, is said to trace every psychic rupture in the galaxy's history. According to myth, its final branch terminated in a zone of impossible overlap, a place where time, identity, and reality twisted into contradiction. Some believe this location was where the rift would first emerge. Others claim it was where it always had existed, hidden by illusions. But no one speaks its name. The theory is terrifying, not because it locates the epicenter, but because it implies the Eldar have always known it and refused to act. Why would the Eldari, whose very culture is built around navigating the collapse of fate, keep silent about such a horror? Perhaps it was a matter of survival. To intervene may have accelerated their extinction. To reveal the truth might have empowered those who would misuse it. There are dark rumors that certain Farseers saw the rift not as an ending, but as a delay. That in permitting it to form, they could divert the Rana Dandra, push the doom of their race a little further into the void. If this is true, then their silence was not cowardice, it was sacrifice. The Inari movement complicates things further. With the emergence of Ennead and the belief in rebirth through death, many Eldar began to reinterpret the Great Rift as a necessary stage, a cleansing fire that would burn away the rot of the galaxy and forge something new. From this perspective, the Rift is not a mistake, but a birth canal. And any knowledge of its origin would be both sacred and forbidden. To disclose it would profane the cycle. Then there is the matter of the webway. The Eldar's secret realm of movement, older than the Imperium, predates the birth of Slaanesh itself. When the Rift tore through the galaxy, it did not simply slice real space, it distorted the webway as well. Certain passages collapsed, others grew unstable. Entire enclaves were cut off. But deep within the labyrinthine dimension, some claim there are nodes where the Rift pulses most strongly. If any race could triangulate such a point, it would be the Eldar. And yet, they say nothing. Some Imperial scholars believe this silence is not strategic, but cultural. The Eldari are a race scarred by knowledge. Their pride led to their fall, their wisdom birthed a god. To speak truth, for them, is to risk destiny. Perhaps they do not name the Epicenter because in doing so they might empower it. Or worse, they might summon it anew. Among the Harlequins, those mad jesters who dance for the laughing god, there are tales of the Rift's origin being a joke too dangerous to tell, a punchline that unravels sanity. They do not laugh when they speak of it. And when asked where the Rift began, they answer with riddles, or dances, or silence. This silence may be the most eloquent answer of all. If the Eldar know the truth, and choose not to share it, then it must be because the truth is unbearable. Or perhaps it is because the Imperium, arrogant, blind, violent, would only weaponize such knowledge. Better to let the Mon-K drown in their ignorance than to give them the thread that unravels the entire tapestry. The Black Library is more than a repository. It is a wound in the fabric of reality, stitched together by will and mystery. Hidden deep within the webway, guarded by Harlequins and watched by the Segrok himself, it houses the collective psychic record of chaos, prophecy, and forgotten truths. If there is a place where the epicenter of the Great Rift might be known, it is there. But those who seek that knowledge rarely return unchanged. The library is not a hall of facts. It is a realm of stories so powerful that to read them is to risk becoming one. Among its oldest tomes are said to be chronicles from before the fall of the Eldar, etched into psycho-reactive crystal and bound in spells of silence. These texts do not describe the Rift's formation as an event, but as a narrative convergence, a point at which too many destinies collided, forcing reality to fracture. The Harlequins refer to it with a name that defies translation, something like the story that sings back, a tale that changes depending on the reader. For the humans who have glimpsed such visions, the experience is fatal. Their minds unravel, consumed not by horror, but by ambiguity. That is the power of the Black Library. It does not simply store knowledge, it reflects the seeker. If an inquisitor enters it hoping for certainty, they find endless contradictions. If a farseer enters seeking warning, they see reassurance. And if one were to seek the origin of the Rift, they might see themselves, standing at the center of a storm that never ends. This interpretive terror is why so few return, and why those who do speak only in riddles or are burned before they can say more. There are whispers that the library contains a map of the Rift not in space, but in psyche, a diagram of the galaxy's collective trauma drawn from the screams of 1 billion dying psychers. It shows not coordinates, but impacts, the moments when worlds fell silent, when dreams turned toxic, when saints bled from the eyes. According to some Harlequin tales, the map spirals inward, not toward Cadia or Terra or the Eye, but to a void. A literal blankness. A part of the galaxy where nothing is recorded, because nothing has ever been allowed to be known. An unplace, an epicenter not of space, but of untruth. This idea terrifies the Inquisition more than any demonic manifestation. That the epicenter may be a place that resists narrative itself. That no matter how many stories are told, how many auguries cast, how many psychic dives attempted, the Rift's origin remains outside the script. This suggests a will. A hand that writes reality not to be read, but to be obeyed. In this view, the Black Library is not hiding the truth. It is protecting us from a story that would overwrite our own. There are factions within the Harlequins who believe the Great Rift is itself a performance, a divine tragedy authored by the Warp. Its purpose is not to destroy, but to express, to show the galaxy the consequences of its own madness. And in every great performance, there is a twist, a secret that redefines everything. The epicenter, then, would not merely be a point of origin, but the reveal. The moment when the actors realize they are not in control of the play, that they are not the heroes, that the curtain has already fallen. Some whisper that the laughing god has seen this truth and that is why he hides, not out of fear, but because he understands that the punchline cannot be delivered yet, that the audience is not ready. And so the Harlequins dance and the Black Library expands, always seeking new stories to delay the ending, to hold back the moment when the rift's true nature becomes clear and reality itself becomes fiction. What makes this all so chilling is that the Black Library could tell us the truth. It could reveal the epicenter. It could name the place, the moment, the cause. But it does not, which means either the truth is too dangerous to know, or it has already been told, and we simply have not recognized it yet. The Emperor of Mankind, the Master of Humanity, the golden throne-bound corpse god of Terra, has long been hailed as the most powerful psychic entity born of human flesh. His light guides the Imperium. His will forged the Imperium. His silence sustains it. And yet, when the Great Rift tore the galaxy in two, he did not warn his sons. He did not cry out. No visions were sent. No decrees were given. The Astronomicon faltered. The warp surged, and the Emperor remained silent. How is it that the god of humanity did not foresee the most devastating cataclysm since the Horus Heresy? Among the most heretical yet persistent theories within the secret circles of the Ordo Malleus is this. The Emperor did not fail to see the Great Rift. He was blinded to it. That the warp, chaotic though it is, possesses moments of intentional opacity. Just as a mortal mind can reject trauma, so too can the Immaterium shield certain events from even the mightiest gaze. There may have been something about the Rift's creation, its intent, its nature, that defied not only understanding but perception itself. A psychic void so absolute it eclipsed even the Emperor's foresight. There are more radical interpretations. Some argue the Emperor did see it coming and chose not to stop it, that he allowed the Great Rift to form as part of a greater plan. Perhaps he foresaw that the Imperium had grown too stagnant, too complacent, too bloated on the illusions of safety. The Rift, then, was not a failure of vigilance, but a purge. A cosmic pruning to force the species to evolve, to adapt, to fight anew. If this is true, then the Emperor's blindness was an act of willful detachment, a divine gamble at a time when hope had become fossilized. But what if it was not foresight that failed, but presence? What if, in the moment of the Rift's formation, the Emperor's essence, so long bound to the Golden Throne, flickered? We know that his power sustains the Astronomicon, that his psychic signature is the brightest in the galaxy. Yet the Noctis Eterna saw that light vanish. Could it be that something, or someone, disrupted him? That the Great Rift was not just an eruption, but a strike? A psychic assassination attempt not to destroy his body, but to sever his soul from the galaxy? Such a theory aligns with reports of strange psychic phenomena on Terra during the Rift's birth. High-ranking astropaths, always attuned to the throne's hum, described sudden emptiness. The sense of being unplugged from reality. Some died, others went mad. A few remain catatonic to this day, their minds still screaming in silent horror. If the Emperor was momentarily removed, then even his power would have been insufficient to hold back the tides. The epicenter, in this view, was not distant. It was the very throne itself, the point at which the galaxy's psychic dam failed. This leads to darker speculation that the Emperor was complicit, not out of malice, but out of inevitability. That in trying to hold back the warp for so long, he created a pressure so great that it had to release. And that the Rift is the exhalation of 10,000 years of tension. His burden had become too vast, the light of the Astronomicon too stretched, his will frayed by time and pain and prayer. In this vision, the Emperor did not fail to act. He collapsed, and the Rift was his shattering echo. And still, there are those who believe that the Emperor has changed, that he is no longer who he was during the Great Crusade, that his mind, his essence, has been altered by the constant consumption of souls, the endless psychic drain, that what remains on the throne is a god, yes, but a different kind of god, one whose vision no longer encompasses linear time, one who no longer perceives past, present, and future as we do. In this state, perhaps the rift was never a surprise, because for him, it always was. A moment he neither begins nor ends, only is. This is the true horror of the Emperor's blind spot. It may not be blindness at all. It may be the cold stare of a being who sees everything and yet chooses nothing, who has transcended comprehension, and in doing so, abandoned the galaxy to fend for itself. In this interpretation, the search for the epicenter is not a hunt for coordinates. It is a desperate plea for reassurance that someone, somewhere still sees, still cares. Within the ever-shifting nightmare of the Great Rift lie places that no longer conform to the rules of reality. These are not simply corrupted systems or lost worlds. They are demonic realms, fully absorbed into the warp's embrace. The laws of physics, time, and identity become fluid, rewritten by the dominant will of whatever dark god reigns there. These daemon worlds serve as footholds for chaos, but more than that, they serve as anchors, nodes through which the Great Rift spreads, twists, and breathes. And they are treacherous beyond imagination. Each of these worlds defies mapping. Attempts by the Adeptus Mechanicus to scan or quantify their mass result in contradictions. Planetary cores that both exist and do not, atmospheres that fluctuate between poison and song. In some cases, these planets appear to be in multiple locations at once. Navigators who gaze upon them go mad not from fear, but from the unbearable sense of narrative collapse, as if the world itself rejects the concept of a single story. If one seeks the epicenter of the rift within these worlds, they will find not clarity, but infinite competing truths. Take the example of Skullithrax Reborn, a hell world supposedly floating near the edge of the segmentum obscurus. In some reports, it is a realm of eternal blizzards, haunted by echoes of Karn the Betrayer's wrath. In others, it has become a palace of blood and fire, claimed by Khorne himself. Both versions are said to exist simultaneously, superimposed yet irreconcilable. To search there for an origin is to drown in paradox. Every answer splits into more questions, like a hydra of narrative distortion. There is a horrifying elegance to this. The daemon worlds do not simply hide the epicenter. They replicate it. Each claims to be the source. Each pulses with the arrogance of centrality. This is no accident. It is a strategy of obfuscation, whether divine or emergent. If every node claims to be the center, then none can be confirmed. Even for those who dwell in these places, the demon princes, the possessed warlords, the mad prophets, truth is subjective. They speak of their world as the nexus of the rift because, in their warped perception, it is. And they are not lying. They are simply speaking from within a reality warped beyond cohesion. Some inquisitors believe that the daemon worlds are deliberately structured to mislead. That chaos itself has learned to weaponize ambiguity. A coherent epicenter could be targeted, studied, perhaps even reversed. But a field of 1,000 false centers, each defended by legions of daemons and guarded by impossible physics, ensures eternal confusion. The Great Rift thus remains untraceable, not because it is distant, but because it is everywhere and nowhere, refracted through a prism of daemonic egos. This has led to increasingly desperate efforts among Imperial scholars to isolate what they call psychic echoes, the residual imprints of trauma left in the warped skin at the moment of the rift's birth. These echoes, when traced, seem to originate from dozens of locations, often contradicting one another. Some suggest they converge briefly near the maelstrom, others near the ghoul stars. A few even claim deep space within the halo zone. But every attempt to follow these trails ends the same way, in distortion, in madness, or in a planet that insists it is the source and demands worship. The most disturbing example is the world known only as Anamnesis. No Imperial cartograph contains its coordinates. It is said to appear only to those who dream of the rift's origin. A place that exists entirely in vision, yet manifests physically enough to consume entire ships. Survivors of such encounters report hearing their own thoughts voiced by the planet itself, a living entity that feeds on the desire to know. It offers answers, but those answers change every time they are spoken. This has given rise to the theory that anamnesis is not a world, but a psychic virus, one that generates false epicenters to trap the minds of those who seek the truth. And if even one of these worlds is the true origin, if somewhere buried beneath layers of contradiction and warp mirage lies the point where the rift first tore, how would we know? What measure of reality could confirm it? In the daemon worlds, everything is true, and everything is a lie. To find the center there is to lose yourself, to be rewritten by the story the warp wants you to believe. And in such a place, the only thing more dangerous than not finding the epicenter is thinking you have. When the Great Rift was born, the galaxy screamed, not with sound, but with thought. A scream so vast, so raw, that it shattered the minds of untold millions. Psychers bled from their eyes, their ears, their souls. Astropaths, the telepathic lifeblood of the Imperium's communication network, went mad en masse. Some fell silent forever, others burst into flame, others yet whispered blasphemies until inquisitorial bullets gave them peace. This was not merely a storm, it was an extinction-level event for the psychic tapestry of mankind, and in that scream, any record of the epicenter was drowned. Unlike conventional messages, astropathic transmissions are not structured data. They are impressions, emotions, psychic bursts sent across the warp and shaped into meaning by trained minds. When the rift tore through the galaxy, it did more than sever communication lines. It rewrote the medium itself. Astropathic choirs did not simply fail, they became conduits for the warp's unfiltered rage. What passed through them was not information but trauma, the psychic equivalent of staring into a sun and seeing only betrayal. Even those who survived bear the scars. There are enclaves of astropaths today who live in permanent isolation, tended like wounded relics. They murmur in dream languages, recounting visions no human can parse. Some draw maps in their blood, others carve spirals into walls, claiming to trace the scream's path through their minds. But none agree. Each recounts a different origin, a different direction, a different meaning. These are not lies, they are fractured truths, echoes distorted by the warp's refusal to be linear. One astropath, a famed Imperial savant known as Iolanthe Terravan, claimed in her final coherent utterance that the rift was the echo of something that did not happen, happening all at once. Her mind then collapsed into recursive paradox, endlessly repeating a phrase in a dead Xenos tongue until she finally starved. Her writings, salvaged by the Ordo Astra Telepathica, hint at a psychic absence, a negative event that somehow caused reality to rupture. If true, then the rift was not born in space, but in consciousness, a void that entered the collective human psyche and ruptured it from within. The sheer scale of psychic noise during the rift's emergence makes reconstructing any chronology impossible. It is as if every psyker in the galaxy experienced a simultaneous, unique apocalypse, a personalized cataclysm tailored to their fears, regrets, and secrets. Some dreamed of worlds burning that did not exist. Others saw versions of themselves committing atrocities they never enacted. These were not hallucinations, they were echoes of alternate fates, timelines bleeding into each other through the wound. In that maelstrom, no true image of the epicenter could form. Every attempt to triangulate is disrupted by 1,000 contradictory signals. The Ordo Chronos once attempted to gather survivors of the scream, psychics from every corner of the Imperium who had lived through the birth of the rift. They were placed in a sealed facility, monitored and questioned, their visions recorded. Within a week, the facility had ceased to exist. Official records list it as a reactor failure. Unofficially, witnesses spoke of the psychers synchronizing, chanting in perfect unison, then simply vanishing, as if rewritten by a higher narrative. Some say the last word they spoke was begin. This has led to a horrifying realization that the psychic echo of the rift is not aftershock, but mechanism. That every scream, every vision, every mad utterance is part of a pattern. A psychic program executing itself across the galaxy's minds, ensuring that the epicenter remains unknowable by scattering perception. In this view, the warp itself wants the origin hidden, not because it was accidental, but because it was intentional, a design meant to self-conceal. A godmind's encryption key, written in pain. It may be that the rift's psychic scream was not a symptom of its birth, but its voice, the first utterance of a new consciousness. A warp entity vast enough to span the galaxy, born in fire and death and speaking not in language but in trauma. And every astropath who died, every psyker who wept blood, every mind that fractured, was a listener. The rift did not need to be seen, it only needed to be heard. There are whispers among the most secretive sects of the Inquisition that the Great Rift is not merely a wound or a symptom. It is a trial. Not a punishment from the gods of chaos, nor a failure of the Emperor's vigilance, but a crucible crafted to test something older than either. This theory, shared only among those who have long since forsaken hope of promotion or survival, posits that the warp itself is a form of consciousness, not merely an echo of mortal emotion, but a sentient totality. And the rift is its question. The Imperium views reality as something static, a thing to be defended, preserved, locked in amber beneath the gaze of the Emperor. But the warp sees differently. It is change incarnate, memory without boundary, emotion unbound by flesh. When the rift formed, it was not reacting to an event, it was responding to a condition, the stagnation of the galaxy, the decay of will, a cosmic sclerosis that choked the potential of every thinking species. And so the rift opened, not to destroy, but to force movement, to test whether the galaxy would survive transformation or be consumed by it. This is not a comforting theory. It suggests that the warp is not merely a realm of daemons and madness, but a conscious ecosystem, an intelligence so vast it defies recognition, one that has grown tired of watching sentient beings stumble endlessly into self-destruction. And like any immune system responding to infection, it unleashed a fever. The Great Rift, then, is the galaxy's purgation. Its ordeal, a forced confrontation with everything hidden, repressed, denied. In this light, the absence of an epicenter is not a mystery. It is a message. The test was never about a singular world or act. It was not about who cast the first spell or broke the final pylon. It was about everyone. The Imperium, the Eldar, the Necrons, the Orcs, the Tyranids. All of them had reached a plateau. Every empire repeating its cycle, the same wars, the same tyrants, the same prayers, the same betrayals. The rift tore through that repetition like a blade through flesh. And now, nothing can be the same. Consider how the galaxy has changed. The Imperium is no longer whole. The false stability of the past has been shattered. Guilliman has returned, not as a conqueror, but a reformer. The ecclesiarchy clutches its icons with trembling hands. The Mechanicus has been forced to confront truths buried since the dark age of technology. The Eldari walk paths they had abandoned for millennia. The Necrons stir with a new clarity, perhaps sensing the warp storms they cannot command. And even the Tyranids, those beasts beyond the veil, shift their patterns, adapting to a cosmos that no longer obeys its old rhythms. The test, then, is one of evolution, of spirit, not flesh. The Great Rift did not ask who would survive. It asked who could change, who could transcend dogma, who could abandon tradition when it no longer served, who could reforge themselves in fire and shadow. And the epicenter is missing not because it never existed, but because we are standing in it. Every soul that breathes, every mind that dares to question, every creature that feels the pull of destiny or despair, we are all at the center, and our choices are the answer. But with this interpretation comes a deeper terror. If the rift is a question, then it implies an audience. Someone, or something, is waiting for our reply. Not with words, not with prayers, but with transformation. And if we fail to provide an answer the warp deems worthy, what then? Does it recede, satisfied that we are not ready? Or does it escalate, open wider, speak again? There are cults forming already, interpreting the rift as gospel. Not chaos cults, not in the traditional sense. These are movements of thought, of raw belief, that cut across faction and species. Imperial officers who abandon rank to seek visions. Tech priests who rewrite the canticles of the Omnissiah. Eldari who embrace death willingly, believing it a path to rebirth. Even among the Tau, there are whispers of the Veil Song, a concept entirely new, suggesting exposure to the warp's truth is mutating their very philosophies. In the deepest reaches of the galaxy, an awakening is occurring. And not all awakenings are gentle. The warp does not tolerate hesitation, it demands response, and so the galaxy convulses. Planets burn, prophets scream, gods battle in dream and flesh. But the test continues, and the question echoes louder now than ever before. Where is the epicenter? Look in the mirror. There are theories so dark, so corrosive to the foundation of the Imperium, that even the Inquisition dares not name them aloud. They are the thoughts that flicker at the edge of sanctioned doctrine, not because they are heretical lies, but because they might be true. And among them lies the most disturbing answer to the mystery of the Great Rift's epicenter: that it does not exist, not because it cannot be found, but because it has been erased. Not lost, not hidden, but removed from reality itself by a design so vast and malevolent that it infects even memory. To believe this is to accept that the Imperium is not merely ignorant, it is deceived, that somewhere, long before the rift erupted, a decision was made. Perhaps by the Emperor himself, perhaps by the High Lords, perhaps by some unspeakable warp entity masquerading as wisdom. A decision to cut the galaxy's future away from its past, to sever cause from consequence, and to mask it with light, with war, with narrative. The silence around the epicenter, then, is not an absence. It is an act of censorship written into the bones of the universe. There are records, ancient, fragmented, forbidden, that suggest the Adeptus Administratum once classified entire sectors under codes reserved only for the most extreme existential threats. These sectors no longer appear on maps. Their stars are listed as extinguished, their populations presumed assimilated or destroyed. But what is strange is the consistency. Each entry ends not in destruction, but in nullification. A phrase appears again and again in scattered logs, always redacted, always left incomplete. Origin event converges on, followed by silence. Data that is not redacted but overwritten. And there are those who claim that the Inquisition itself no longer remembers what it once knew. That within the Ordo Malleus lie locked vaults which cannot be opened, not because they are sealed, but because the keys have been unmade. That knowledge of the rift's epicenter is not only forbidden, it is self-consuming. Attempts to document it collapse into paradox. Words rearrange, images blur, entire memory cores fail. The truth has become mimetically toxic, a viral idea that devours itself upon exposure. This has led to the concept of the rift as a deliberate anti-narrative, a weapon designed not to kill, but to unwrite. A force that does not destroy planets, but stories. That erases connectivity, continuity, history. And in this erasure, all attempts to assign origin are rendered futile. There are only effects: pain, chaos, division, but no cause, no genesis, and therefore, no accountability. For a civilization built upon myth and memory, this is an apocalypse more profound than any Xenos threat. It suggests that the Imperium is not at war with chaos, it is adrift within it. That the enemy is not merely out there in the warp, but embedded within the timeline, unraveling causality, making the past into shifting quicksand. It means the epicenter may never be found, because it was never supposed to be found. Because to know it would be to reknit the weave, and the weave has already been burned. Yet in the deepest archives of the Librarius Hereticus, there exists a single phrase, scratched onto a purity seal affixed to a ruined codex of unknown origin. The lie is maintained because it is needed, but every lie leaves a shadow. Perhaps that is what the Great Rift is. Not a phenomenon, but a shadow. The afterimage of something no longer permitted to exist. A wound whose cause was too terrible to name, so it was unmade, and the galaxy left only with the pain. If this is true, then the question is not, where is the epicenter? It is, who made it disappear? Was it the desperate act of a loyal servant, trying to preserve mankind from a revelation that would shatter it? Was it the final curse of a dying god, jealous and wounded? Or was it something else, a silence imposed from beyond, from outside the boundaries of our story, reminding us that we are not the authors? And so, the Imperium continues. The rift pulses, wars rage, truths are burned. But somewhere in the quiet between screams, a whisper remains. Not of coordinates, not of dates, but of intent. That the epicenter was never meant to be found, because in finding it, we would also find who we really are.